on City Hall. And the meeting is now being recorded. You probably were asked that to join, so you'll be able to reference this again. We have a setup tonight. We're going to be here for about an hour and a half. And so as you think of your questions, if you would please put your questions into the chat box. We're going to compile the questions and read off some of those question and answers during a couple of set times that we have. My name is Wade Bryson. I'm an Assembly member, and I'm the chair of the Public Works and Facilities Committee, which you'll see this particular topic is at Public Works and Facilities. So I'm going to help moderate the meeting tonight. With me or joining us will be Katie Kester. She is the director for Public Works and Engineering. We have Jean Wren, who is the CBJ architect. Sean Boyley, principal at Northwind Architects. James Bibb with Northwind Architects, and Steve Simpson with SRS Architecture. And so everybody has a little bit of a different information, and we're going to give you an opportunity to ask questions, but if you have your question, the best thing you can do is put it into the chat box. You'll have the best chance to get your question answered. They are going to compile all these questions at the end of the meeting tonight, and we'll answer them, and then those questions and answers will be available publicly on website information that we'll present at the end of the presentation. Director Kester, I do not believe I have left anything out. If you could go ahead and take over from here. Director Kester with Public Works and Engineering.
Thank you. Jump in just for a sec to clarify, to put your questions in the Q&A box. There is no chat box.
That's Sorry. Of course what I meant, the Q&A box. Thank you for helping me with that.
Thank you. That's the difference between Zoom webinar and Zoom regular meeting. So we're all still learning our Zoom vocabulary. Thank you, Assembly Member Bryson, for that introduction. I want to build on that a little bit and just lay out the structure for this evening's meeting. Again, we want to respect your time, respect the fact that you've showed up and are participating, and give you an idea of what to expect and how to balance, participation and information in this new Zoom environment that we find ourselves in. Assemblymember Bryson gave a lovely introduction. I'm going to go over the survey results. You recall we had at the end of 2021 a really the public participated really robustly in a survey on a new city hall, and that really informed the process that we're going through today. So I want to make sure and highlight that. Then I want to talk about where we are in the process, because of course this didn't just start yesterday, and there's lots more opportunities before any decisions are made to engage. At that point, as Assemblymember Bryson said, we're going to have a few minutes to respond to some of the questions in the chat, and how we're going to do that is just pivot to a moderator to collate those questions. And again, like he said, if we don't get to your question, we're going to collate those and present those to the Public Works and Facilities Committee, and also post them on the project website. But that'll give an opportunity to answer some of those questions. Then we'll hand it over to the second part of the meeting, which is looking at the specific sites that are under analysis at this point in the process. And our chief architect, Wren, will present, and Northwind Architecture will present on that. Again, we'll pause for some questions. And then at the end of the meeting, we will reserve time, hopefully a good chunk of time, to be able to pull people over from the audience to participate in the Zoom room with public comment verbally. Different people like different ways to comment and interact. And so we want to make sure that we provide all of that and balance between respecting your time and making sure this provides a lot of useful information for Assembly members when making their decisions about this project. So next slide. Why are we talking about City Hall? I had titled this slide originally New City Hall, and then I was like, well, we're really not talking about a new City Hall. We're talking about the concept of a City Hall and what to do about it, because the current facility is 70 years old, and it's got a lot of things that need major maintenance and repair. And Chief Architect Wren will go into that later in the presentation. But we estimate to get another 25 years out of that facility we're going to need to invest a minimum of $11 million. So, whether we talk about new city hall or this city hall, we're really at the point where we have to talk about the facility and how it's not meeting the community's needs. And that's because city offices right now are spread out between 5 different buildings downtown. Right now, I'm speaking to you from Marine View, which is an apartment building in an office probably much larger than I actually need. And I think was originally someone's living room. It's actually got a beautiful view of the ocean and the mountains, but just most CBJ employees are not working in City Hall. You probably remember this conversation from 2018 or 2019 when we were talking about building a new city hall on top of the downtown transit center. That's definitely part of the conversation. But when we initiated this process last year, we really wanted to restart the conversation and take a step back. And that's why the survey was so important, cast a really broad net, outside the box, and really look at this problem of City Hall and how City Hall serves the community with fresh eyes and fresh perspective. So I would invite you to think of this conversation not as restarting the conversation from 2019, but as a new conversation. Next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about the survey. The survey results are all posted on the project website, and there's so much good information in here. And I really want to thank everyone who participated in that survey. I've spent hours poring over that information. But the purpose of this survey was to ask people who are really engaged and willing to take the time to comment on new City Hall, to comment on how they used it and what was important to them. And the feedback was really great. Like I said, lots of good feedback. Over 1,300 people responded to the survey. And it really informed how we put together this site selection process. So, this is just a graphic from the summary presentation that shows that over 70% of the public is supportive or very supportive of a new City Hall versus continuing to rent space. Next slide. So again, I mentioned we got a lot of really good feedback on what is important to the community and to Juneau residents and how they use City Hall and what they want to see in a City Hall. And so this slide just talks about the different questions that were asked and how they were rated. And you will see when we talk a little bit later about the matrix that we used to analyze the different sites, that we used these same criteria in the same order. Overwhelmingly, CBJ residents want a facility that's designed for a long service life. This acknowledges that the city will be in business for a very long time, right? We're not going anywhere. This is a facility that should be built to last a very long time. Parking was another issue that came up. Having a really energy efficient and sustainable facility came up and scored very highly. And I think this speaks to the need to make this an investment in our future. So the need to use our resources today to save money in the future. And I really appreciated that from the survey. So again, really good feedback, and you'll see later how we have used that to inform the process. Next slide. Another question that the survey asked was proposed sites. This was particularly useful for me being relatively new to Juneau. I moved here a little over a year and a half ago. And so we asked the question, do you have a specific site or an area of town that you would like to see a City Hall in? And only about 2/3 of the respondents actually suggested a location, and you could select more than one location. So the numbers, aren't necessarily accurate, don't add up to 100, but what they do provide is just a snapshot of how the public, the responding public, thought about it. And there were pages and pages of different site recommendations, again, that were collated and poured over and thought about. This is just a snapshot of the top few. And you'll see, Walmart scored very high. That's a facility that the community overwhelmingly would like to see repurposed as something useful. Downtown also scored very high, acknowledging, the importance of a civic center downtown. And again, lots of really good information in that question. So thank you for that. Next slide. So I've talked a little bit about this matrix that we have used to organize, for lack of a better word, all the different options and all the different sites. And that matrix is on the project website. And what we did was break it down into 4 categories: downtown remodel and new construction, and Valley Lemon Creek remodel and new construction. And then you'll see here on the right-hand slide, just the different criteria that were used to analyze this. And a lot of those came directly from the survey and the responses from the survey. Next slide. So this is a list, not a comprehensive list of all the sites that bubbled up to the top, but these are the sites that were analyzed by the Public Works and Facilities Committee. So it's a comprehensive list, lots of different places. Some of these sites fell off the list really quickly for obvious reasons, like the zoning wouldn't allow office facility. I think there was a lot of hope when we began this process that there would be some existing facilities like 410 Willoughby and 400 Willoughby that could be repurposed. Government moves slowly during this process. Those have been purchased by Klink and Haida, but what great synergy to have those organizations, headquartered right in our downtown. So again, the projects kind of fell off the list for different reasons, and that analysis is also a part of the Public Works and Facilities Committee record. Spoiler alert, the top 4 sites that Public Works and Facilities Committee looked at that you'll be learning about more today are highlighted in blue. So I won't divulge a lot of the details, but next slide. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the process, and I know this is a boring slide, but it will be on the website. And what's important is it demonstrates all the different points that you will have to participate in this process. So our next major milestone is the Valentine's Day Public Works and Facilities Committee meeting, where we're going to report on this meeting, and we're also going to ask the committee to narrow the list to 2 sites. And that will allow us to do a deep economic analysis, and Northwind will do that for us and talk about the really nuts and bolts of the economic impact of those 2 alternatives. And we'll have additional public meetings on that. And the other point that I think I made in the beginning of the meeting, but really to emphasize here, we're marching towards a October deadline of an election. And what that means for my calendar is something before the assembly in July, so that it has time to make it on the ballot. And whether or not a new facility goes before the voters, something will go before the voters, because we have to invest some funds in city offices. That is just kind of the point we are. So whatever decisions are made, that is the goal, October 2022. Next slide. All right, so I'm going to pause here, and this is the project website that I keep referring to. Also, the email list, or the email for questions, comments, the listserv. But I want to pause while this is up and see if Ms. Wren has collected any comments from the question box or questions that I can respond to.
Thank you, Director Kester. Yes, we have one question from Eric Cody Salter. He writes, considering the fact that the majority of the public voted for the City Hall being in Lemon Creek, and realizing that the Walmart building is a bad idea, shouldn't the first place to consider putting City Hall be put there? How about across from Western Auto? The police station and the city shop have both been moved to Lemon Creek. A major consideration should be the downtown parking problem would be solved by moving City Hall out of downtown.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. 20% of residents selected Lemon Creek when, 20% of respondents selected Lemon Creek as an option in that survey. And I'm actually not even sure the specific site that you're talking about, Cody. So maybe you can email me a little bit more information so I can look at that analytically. But really, we went through the process, presented all this information to PWFC, and right now we have landed on 4 sites, and the Lemon Creek site is the Walmart facility. So some of that like back and forth and public process has at this point refined it to Walmart being that Lemon Creek option. Any other questions?
Yes, we just got another one from Murray Walsh, who asks, the comprehensive plan used to require that City Hall be kept downtown. Does it still have that requirement?
I'm not familiar with anything legally binding in the comprehensive plan that talks about City Hall being downtown. But I am, as mentioned before, newish to CDJ. I do think there are lots of good reasons, and that's part of the Assembly's analysis when looking at where to site a new city hall. And all of those are definitely talked about in lots of the city plans, not just comprehensive plan, but blueprint and the Ock Village District Plan. So there's a lot of really good resources for the Assembly to lean on that that can help inform that part of the decision.
Director Kester, I have a question for you that might help answer a couple other questions. When the city staff were looking at potential locations for City Hall, didn't they go over Lemon Creek to see if there were other like vacant lots that were available? So those 12 locations that were on the previous slide, those were only 12 of the spots that were looked at. They looked at every single available location, or didn't they look at every single available location in terms of like space wise? If the space was big enough, they took a peek at it to see if it was suitable. That was, is that a correct understanding, Director Kester?
Thank you, Assemblymember Bryson. Yes, not just space, but zoning. And there's really not a lot of developable land in Lemon Creek that would be zoned for office space in that way. So that is one of the constraints. That's why I asked the respondent to email me more information, because I'm not quite sure the exact lot that he's talking about and if he has new information.
Thank you, Director Kester.
So we just got 2 more comments, which I think will be answered in the second part of the presentation. One is asking, why is a parking garage needed for the Whittier site? And it appears no additional parking is planned for the transit center site. I think we can address that when we get to that part of the presentation. And then Mr. Salter asked, stated Walmart is part of Lemon Creek and should be added to the Lemon Creek number.
Director Kester, I'll let you decide if you want to add the Walmart statistics to the Lemon Creek statistics.
Statistically, because respondents were allowed to select more than one, I think each one of those needs to stand on its own. Walmart, 32% selected Walmart and 20% selected Lemon Creek. There's qualitative data that the Assembly is using to inform their decisions. So there's no, this is information, just like your comments from this meeting will be used as information to inform their process.
Thank you for that, Director Kester. I think that sums it up perfectly. All right, we'll give another moment for questions about how we got to this point. Are there any additional questions for how we got to here?
I'm not seeing any further questions at this time.
All right, Director Kester, can we just go to City Architect Wren and let her begin her process or her presentation?
Thank you, Chair Bryson. So we'll, the next part of the presentation, we'll look at the top 4 sites identified for more analysis by the Public Works and Facilities Committee. As Director Kester stated, we'll be looking at the existing City Hall, that site, Walmart, 450 Whittier and Downtown Transit Center. And here you have the aerial view of those sites. Next slide. So here's the existing City Hall. The pros are, this is the least expensive option in the short term. We anticipate a need for 11.2 million in repairs and needed maintenance on the facility over the next 12 years. We did get lots of feedback against a new City Hall for a variety of reasons. And we always feel that the status quo should be considered. Cons are, that's a chunk of change to invest in a 70-year facility. It doesn't consolidate our city services. We have 67% of our programs downtown are located in leased facilities. And it requires a continued lease of those facilities at $750,000 a year. Another con is that by staying in our existing leased facilities, we miss the opportunity to create more housing downtown in the Marine View building. As businesses have vacated that space, the building owners have been converting those spaces back to apartments. Next slide.
And Ms. Wren, I'd like to just include real quick that housing downtown is one of the Assembly's highest priorities. Should be included in that.
Thank you. So the next site, this shows the aerial view of City Hall and the leased facilities, the red being City Hall and the sky blue buildings are the leased facilities. Next slide. So here's a timeline of the major projects that need to be done. We need to do the exterior painting. The roof's going to need to be replaced. The marquee roof needs to be replaced. We need to install fall protection on the roof. Most of the infrastructure in the building is at the end of its life cycle. The HVAC, the ventilation, part of the building does not have ventilation. Domestic water piping and wastewater piping are at the end of its life. We've just been band-aiding the leaks as we go along. Electrical needs to be upgraded. And the last item out in 2034 would be a major reconfiguration of the space to reflect the current use, as well as upgrading all the restrooms. I'd like to point out that that number is for City Hall proper only, because that's the only building that we own. That wouldn't address any needs in the facilities that we lease. And then I would like to point out that these costs do not include temporarily relocating staff while these construction projects are being done. So, next slide.
So at this time, I'd like to, my name is James Bibb, working with Northwind Architects here, and I'd like to step in and talk about the three remaining sites, the Walmart site out of Lemon Creek area, and the 450 Whittier Street downtown, as well as a downtown transportation center, and go through a similar analysis of pros and cons, how we're looking at each of these sites to lead up to a good discussion on making choices. So the Walmart site, without question, as this came out of the initial study, it was favored for some obvious reasons. It's, if you took a demographics of our community, all the population, you put a dot in the middle of everything, you come pretty close to Walmart. Without question, its access to the broader community is very strong. It's central between downtown and the valley, and I think that's relatively important to a lot of people. The space is large. It has 122,000 square feet, large parking lot. And that in itself, where parking becomes such an important part of this process and decision-making, without a question, the site is really strong in that. The land is leased. This goes back to the things that are challenging, the cons of this. It's leased currently, or if we went forward, it would have to be leased. The standard would be a 50-year lease and would cost money each year to lease it. So that has to be in consideration. It's looking at the size of the building, it's about 3 times the square footage what the City Hall program requires. So it's more than we need. And that's a question we have to ask ourselves. It's an existing building. It was built for a specific purpose many years ago. If you look back at Kmart, well before Walmart, it was built as a warehouse retail. So it'll be a challenge bringing this up to an office code, and that's something we have to be upfront about. Current codes and standards require a major retrofit in order to do that. And with a city hall and like a lot of public buildings, energy efficiency and sustainability becomes a mandate, and that becomes another thing that will be required to be part of that upgrade. The building is set vacant for many years, and we have to consider that as an existing building. If we all know about existing houses or buildings that they take a little effort to get back off the ground. The condition of the building will come into play. The extent of that is unknown until we get into it. It's also, a good point that was brought up in our discussion. It's a great location for other big box retail as an example. So if we dedicate this for specific use, looking down the road as Juneau evolves and grows, the availability for that type of land, that type of parking, is that something we want to ensure that it's set aside for that use? And that's something we should consider. And I put in poor pedestrian access. So while it's kind of, it's in the middle of a place where driving is going to be the main access, and that's good. I mean, I think that's been well recognized, but as far as street access, that has a lot to be desired. That intersection and that side of the highway is, if from the neighborhood you don't want to walk there, compared to downtown, this is a different type of site. Next slide. These two diagrams give you a good idea of what we're looking at in scale in terms of what program requirement we're looking at. The site plan with the orange squares up there shows you on the right is the required program, 45,000 square foot. How much of that goes into that building, and what will we have left over? That shows you the parking requirements for that level of program. Gives you an idea of the offset of scale. We call it a test fit. We like to, let's put these in cubes and put that on, impose that upon the building itself. Gives you an idea of how it would look if we retrofitted it with the current program needs. So that gives some idea that, well, maybe the building could be used for other purposes, so on and so forth. But as far as City Hall, that's sort of what would happen if we took that direction. Next slide. So now I'd like to go back downtown. We've coupled two sites together for analysis right next to each other here in proximity. If we're not familiar with it, most of us are, I'm sure. But we see the existing City Hall down at the bottom there with the status quo notation. City Hall in the red there. Downtown Transportation Center, it's the bottom of Main Street. It's right in downtown proper. And then Whittier site, it's the old public safety building over in the Willoughby district and currently the Oak Village district. And that is the vacant lot now that used to be the public safety. So that's gives you a kind of orientation of where these sites are located. Next slide. .450 Whittier, I'll talk about that first. So it's very important to point out that this is a lot that CBJ currently owns, and not just this lot, the adjacent lot with Zach Gordon, and the parking lot and some areas around there. So if we get off the ground, it's important to give the perspective that's considered a very, very big positive. It is located, what we call this, the state capital identity. So as we move forward and develop a site, it contributes to the downtown development in terms of relating to other public buildings that are important to our community. It becomes consistent with current planning. The Oak Village District is currently under a study to look at long-term possibilities, including housing. As that area develops, this will play a role in that. And that could be a very positive addition to that discussion. It's close to Centennial Hall, and if we move forward with the Civic Center and the waterfront development for the cruise ship, it becomes right centered to that development downtown. It's starting fresh. This is a really important point. If you can invest a lot of money, you want to do it right. There's a lot of positives about creating a 100-year building, we call it. And that has to do with low maintenance. Long-term, we can plan that in from the start. You can plan in energy efficiencies, things that are a priority to the community. And that could be seen as a plus. You're not dealing with existing conditions that you're perhaps making compromises on. It will include underground parking, and it'll require shared parking. There might be an opportunity as that area develops that the large parking lot adjacent to that site could be used for evening hour meetings. And then the last one of the positives we're identifying, it has a very good pedestrian access. Similar to all sites downtown, it's easy walking distance from all public buildings and the urban center. The downside, the con, it's a bit outside of the downtown core. If you look at the existing City Hall, it has been there historically right off the waterfront. It's easily be identifiable. It anchors our downtown. We're moving this around Telephone Hill, and there's a bit of a barrier there. Anybody that tries to walk that in winter, you know, that's just going from downtown to Centennial Hall is sometimes a stretch. So it's outside that core. It may be a great location for other developments. So I talk a lot about this district evolving. Housing, as I brought up before, is a good example. If housing is a priority, that has been talked about and discussed in planning, that the Ock Village District, formerly Willoughby District, is a great location for housing. So is there other uses for that area that could be better? And that should be discussed and understood. It would require a broader parking strategy. So anybody that knows the downtown generally, parking is going to be a factor in how we look at this project. With all the parking requirements for in this location specifically with Centennial Hall, the state, how the Jack would evolve, that a broader parking strategy will have to be part of this. Next slide. These are some diagrams to follow up with the earlier slide. You can see what we call the test fit on this site. So it's a rather small site, but we can stack it 3 stories high. So the graphic up in the upper right shows how this program would be stacked in 3 levels, and that we can fit it on site and put parking underneath. The one in the bottom left, I should throw this in, gets back to the broader development potential for the Ock Village District. And this has been something in the city planning since the 60s. And there's about that this could be part of a greater expansion of downtown and really anchor this capital complex. And I think it's noted that as this grows, civic and public buildings of this nature plays a role in how neighborhoods develop. It could really be part of that anchorage of this relationship. Next slide. The Downtown Transit Center. Well, again, it's owned by the city. It's a site that starts fresh in that manner. It has been planned from the very beginning to be expanded with 3 levels of either parking expansion or some sort of program. So it starts out in that sort of positive role. It is located downtown. Main Street is a direct connection to our Capitol complex up the hill. It is associated with other public buildings downtown. So it enhances the state capitol downtown identity. And if I want to dig deeper in that, if we look about Juneau as a state capital represented statewide, you know, adding to the context of that being a possible addition could be seen as a positive as we're stewards to our state capital. It's built on existing foundations. So the good thing about it is we have at least a start on the foundation. So we're out of the ground, as they say. And the idea that we could take that benefit and move upwards on it, in that sense, that we are again talking about a 100-year-old building potential with maintenance and sustainability built in. So we can start fresh with systems that would be beneficial to a building. The cons, well, I think I go back to the existing public library down off the parking garage. You know, it'd be great if that thing was on the street. And so if we elevate this very important public building up a number of stories off the ground, is that the best placement for that? We'd have to work really hard to get that lobby connection if that was the case, but it should be this City Hall. There should be a front door, and that front door sometimes is best on right on the street, so it's accessible to the public, physically and symbolically. It displaces existing parking, so that if you can imagine that parking garage outside of COVID, it is plumb full most of the year with legislative use, downtown use. And if we stack program on top of that, and it's going to tax that initial purpose for that site. So we'd have to have, again, a strategy for that. And now whether we add another floor of parking underneath it, which could be allowable or else, but we'd have to discuss that. It becomes a challenge. The existing concrete structure, well, it was designed as a parking garage, and albeit that we looked at adding floors, we didn't build a mechanical system to do anything with a future office building. So there'd have to be retrofit on the existing building. And that includes a possible addition, or most likely addition, in another lobby, another stair, and another elevator system. So even though it's there, we can work right off it. It'll take some work to get it up to speed to make it useful for additional program on top. And again, I think I've already spoken about it. Future expansion of the parking garage. If we build on top of that, then that whole goal of being able to have program to expand parking downtown will be taken away. We'd have to look at other strategies. Next slide. This is a simple diagram, that whole program test fit. So we did an exercise. So if we had to put that program on top of the garage, well, we can fit it in 2 floors. So that somehow gives you the context of what that would look like. The nice warm light blue translucent is our parking levels. And then the program is on the top levels. And on the edges there's our stairwells. And as you can see along, if you go around the corner on the left side there, we'd have to most likely in this concept put another stair tower and access to those levels. Next slide. Sean, I'm handing it back to you there.
Great, thank you, James. Sean Boyley, James's business partner here at Northwind Architects. And we dug into the costing of this effort with our professional cost estimator. It's been helping us in Juneau for all of my career here. Trying to get some rough order of magnitude numbers for consideration. As Gene and Katie have already presented, the 11.2 million for continued use, development and continued use of the existing city hall doesn't take into account that rental cost of the ancillary spaces over an extended period of time. So because we're dealing with a city building, we got to think in larger scale of time than your average house. So a 40-year plan seems reasonable. So if you take that rent and multiply it times 40, you end up with, this is not taking into consideration escalation of costs, of course, yet that level of analysis comes later when we're focused in on fewer sites. Gets you in the $41.2 million range. And it's a renovation. You're gonna, as James was saying, you're gonna be limited with any renovation. You're gonna be making some compromises in what you can achieve with that. Moving over to the Walmart site. Now, this was a bit of a surprise, but shouldn't have been. You have a building that's 3 times larger than you need, and you have to bring it up to current code with the renovation. Obviously, you wouldn't renovate the entire 122,000 square foot double level volume as Class A office occupancy. However, you would renovate the program requirement area and then either renovate the balance of the building to at least make it code compliant and something that could become something else with other monies later. It's going to take a certain level of effort to do that, to give it some energy efficiency and safety, or to remove it. So we essentially came up with a rough order of magnitude number to either stabilize it and mothball it or tear that portion of the building down. In either case, we end up with about a $43 million project, which is pretty big cost, of course, and it doesn't take the 40-year lease of $270,000 a year into account. You bring those numbers in, and you're up in the $53.8 to $54 million as a comparable cost. Start looking at new construction. It's a little bit more predictable, although of course there's a lot of variables in today's construction economy that bring uncertainty. But we do have projects that have bid recently and are going out to bid right now that kind of prove out where we're at with our estimating efforts. And basically to do the 46,000 square foot program over on the Whittier site, that alone without parking, the parking level underneath it would be about $33.5 million. You add almost $4 million to excavate and push a parking level below that. you end up with about a $47.5 million, or I'm sorry, a $37.5 million project. But that's on a site the city owns. There's no site procurement or rent. You then just have to maintain it. And then the last comparison is the transit center site. Now, of course, this is a project we know an awful lot about. James was the architect of record for that job when it was built. And that was designed to receive up to 3 levels of parking or office building above it. He's correct in that the costs are going to be there to get mechanical, electrical, all the services associated with a different use up there. But it's very possible. And because of that, it becomes the least costly option at about $32.8 million. In, again, these rough order of magnitude cost evaluations. There's a lot of variables in there, of course, in terms of how this is achieved, but that's about where we've landed with trying to put some values on this analysis. Next slide.
All right.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Boyle, for that presentation. Well, we're going to take just a moment. Ms. Kester, have you been compiling questions?
Yes, thank you. We've got some great questions. So
Ms. Kester, I'm going to give you a little bit of time right now to answer some of those before we go to the poll.
All right, so Mr. Hanna asked, and I know that this has been talked about, but he asked, building on top of the transit center will be logistically challenging with no laydown area or room for additional equipment versus the other sites. Is this taken into the cost considerations? So does Northwind want to answer that one? I know you have a good answer for it.
Yeah, it's definitely a line item in our cost estimate. It's just, no matter what you do on that site, it's very tight. We learned that well during the original construction.
The next question is probably more of a comment, but from Mr. Salter. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. He says, I don't mean to be rude, but I think separating Lemon Creek from people selecting Walmart as a manipulation of the numbers. The city could look at buying the parking lot since the building is on leased land. The parking lot is twice as big as needed. I can see that 450 Whittier is already selected. So again, I think that is probably more of a comment, but I appreciate that. Anyone have anything to chime in on that?
I would just throw in that the landowner isn't ready to sell that property or subdivide it. We've already raised that question, I believe, with them, and they're really interested in a long-term lease.
And so
that limits what the city can do with it.
Yeah, and that actually ties into the next question, which is, could the Walmart site be purchased instead of leased? I'm worried that appearance was so low on the list by participants who took the survey. We live in such a beautiful area and we have a lot of awful looking buildings, but I assume we can be assured that whatever is built will be something that fits our area. So I think the first part of that question, to my understanding, the land is not for sale. I do know that we have the representative for the Walmart owner listening in. So I'm sure she will give me more information after this meeting if any of that has changed. And any comments on making sure we build something that fits our beautiful area that we're so fortunate to live in.
Katie, I throw in one more item, that 40-year extension in our price for leasing that site is about what the Walmart property value would be. So again, even if you could buy the property, it's likely going to be in the same magnitude of cost to undertake the project there.
And that's roughly $10 million, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And that's about
that's
the
what
value.
assess that, right? we're close to the assessment.
Right. That's basing off assessed value. So hard to know, but yeah. There was another question that was asked. Does the old Walmart building test fit include all City Hall functions fit into the existing building, i.e. from all 5 of the current City Hall function locations? Mr. Boyle, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, that's exactly what that test fit was to try to illustrate. Moreover, that image illustrated that test fit as if every program element was on the same floor. And in that translucent box that was around it, that was very much not filled with it, the Walmart building in some portions is its full 2-story volume inside. So even when we have the the program spread out on a single level, it barely covers a third of the footprint. If we were to stack it in 2 levels, it would absorb even less of the footprint, more like a fifth of it. So it's a gigantic building. Many people don't quite understand the scale of a building like that when you see it across a sea of parking. It's massive. Honestly, as an architect, I'd love to get a hold of that and turn that into something else, or some other, whether it's this use or some other use. It'd be a really interesting exercise. But it is a very, very large building.
Director Kester, with Mr. Boyley's comment on that, that reminded me of another aspect that's been talked about this, that right now, while there's not a Kmart or a Walmart in that location, it's one of the last large spaces. So that while right now in Juneau's economic condition, we don't have a box store for that, but that's the last area that a box store could go to. So let's say that economic conditions grow over the next decade or so, and then a large box store does want to come to Juneau, that is the last location that's available, because we've been looking all over for large locations. So that's one component of it. The other part of the Walmart thing was, we've talked about some other aspect of it. Forgive me, it slipped my mind as I was thinking of other things. If you want to continue on, Director Kester, with questions and answers.
I am happy to. I see that, let's see, I am skipping Duff, your question, Mr. Mitchell, your question, not because I'm not going to read it, but we have a little, we're going to have a little opportunity to do a poll, and it'll give me time to read it and convey it while people are taking that poll. Mr. Hanna asks, is there a cost developed for adding parking to the transit center site?
Do you want me to answer that, Katie, or do you want to?
Well, I think the answer is no. However, there are different options that have different costs associated with them that would need to be part of the conversation. But I'll let you give a more robust answer.
Well, we had the same thought at one point along this process. And as an aside, outside of our contract, we did have our cost estimator give us current day pricing for putting 2 levels of parking on top of the transportation center. I don't know if it's appropriate to share that, but some of that work has been done. And it's not insignificant for the same reasons that were brought up earlier. To build anything on top of the existing structure, just to access the site and not interrupt the use of the building in the meantime to a great degree, is costly. I mean, that alone's, I think it was like $1.5 million extra to the cost. So I don't want to spill the beans on projected numbers without the city's authorization, but to answer the question, it has been a consideration, just not in our overall analysis to be included with the cost of developing the other potential sites.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry. I'm understanding the question better. And Mr. Hanna, I had thought if there was a cost estimate developed to address the parking issue with downtown transit center, but your question is, what would the cost be to adding additional stories to downtown transit? And honestly, I can't remember that off the top of my head. It was more money than I wanted it to be, because I wanted it to be a very inexpensive solution to our parking conundrum. So Mr. Boyley, feel free to share that spitball number, but I will qualify it with it's very much a spitball number.
It costs about as much today in today's prices and conditions. It costs almost about as much as it cost to build a building in the first place. So we're talking about $8 to $10 million to put the extra floors of parking above the existing parking garage. Again, I was surprised and shocked and amazed by that, because it kind of blows out of the water all of our prior concept of what a structured parking space should cost. But again, our estimator assured me they just did this on a project up in Anchorage, and their numbers are, reasonably accurate for Juneau, again, in rough order of magnitude scale.
Oh, thank you. Mr. Hanna clarifies that he meant to go with the proposed new offices. So hopefully we've answered both the question you asked and the question you didn't ask in our response. We have an anonymous attendee asking, when considering the Walmart site, was there any discussion about the potential of expanding the scope to include other city uses that are not in those 5 downtown sites, i.e. Mount Jumbo, Thane Warehouse? And I can go ahead and take that one. Certainly when we were looking at what would you do with the space that wasn't needed, that wasn't going to be occupied by City Hall proper, as Mr. Boyle mentioned, we use a figure for remodeling that space that would either be what it costs to demo it or to turn it into warehouse space. So that's just like bare bones warehouse. What we didn't analyze is the additional operating costs that would bring with it. So, I think that the analysis of expanding city services or relocating city services definitely hasn't been done. And, it does significantly grow the project until it really becomes something that is difficult to swallow, right, from a cost perspective. But so that's about the extent that that we have thus far looked into what other things could be put in that empty space. All right, I have a nice comment from Mr. Mitchell that I'd like to summarize, but maybe now would be a good time to open the poll, Mr. Bryson, and I can spend a minute or two while you do that reading this comment here.
Yes, thank you, Director Kester. Could we read Mr. Jones' comment to the committee first? I miss Mr. Jones, and I'm going to say that publicly here during this town hall. But Mr. Jones wanted to point out that downtown parking is a major concern. The Planning Commission is asking the Assembly to look at eliminating most required parking for future development. Thus, any parking increases in downtown will fall on all citizens. Where is CBJ looking at putting new parking, if not another garage? And the only information out of all of these sites that includes additional parking would be the 450 Whittier to have parking underneath it. Mr. Bibb or Mr. Boyle, is that correct that no other sites added parking with the exception of that Whittier location?
At this point in the analysis, that's correct. It might also be worth noting that as James had pointed out, with adding an office building on top of the downtown transportation center, that precludes adding more parking above the existing transportation center. So it kind of blocks the ability for the city to add those parking levels if they chose to later, regardless of what the cost of doing that would be. I do want to point out too that the parking under the 450 Whittier site is not all of the parking requirements for that program. It's just a fraction of what's required. So it would be incumbent on the city to reconsider what's happening with the parking that's in between that facility and Centennial Hall, for example, whether or not it's available for lease to anybody else anymore. And then that gets into some bigger political kind of community responsibility issues to our other members of the downtown community. So it's a complicated issue for sure. It's easy to point out how to, resolve some of these problems by looking at ideas that were put on the table years ago. There was once a point where the downtown transit center was briefly explored. We were asked to explore pretty much doubling the size of it by wrapping it around the bottom of Telephone Hill. I mean, that kind of project is still not out of the question. We just know it would be very costly to undertake. So.
Yes, I don't believe that we're going to correct the city's parking problems downtown tonight, but Mr. Bibb, do you have a comment, sir?
No, well, the risk of flying off on a tangent. But the Willoughby use plan, which was a discussion about this very thing as the city evolves and new proposals for new development evolve. And I think both downtown and in the Oak Village district, I mean, the pressure is not going to simply be on anything that if we propose that site be dealt, it's going to be something that's going to be regardless because of the amount of development foreseen in the next the next decade. There's a lot of activity discussed. So I agree, this is a broader parking strategy that will be part of the overall discussion as this moves forward.
I think that's exactly right. Thank you for that, Mr. Bibb. Okay, so at this point, we are going to ask for audience participation. Ms. Samby, can you go ahead and bring up the poll? And so as you've listened to the information that our presenters have given you tonight, you now have an opportunity to pick first choice, second choice, third choice, fourth choice. You can, we're asking you to list these from 1 to 4 in order for your preference. So if you could go ahead and take a moment or two right now to do that. I was going to reach back over to Ms. Kester, and you have another question for us, Ms. Kester. While
I
everybody,
do. I've been I've been saving Mr. Mitchell's, and not because it's not important, but because I wanted to make sure I read it all before I asked it. So the first part of his question is there an economic and community development impact analysis in this site selection process? And I will just interject there and say that the economic analysis will be the next phase of analysis by Northwind. And the DBA actually gave some really great testimony at the last Public Works and Facilities Committee meeting with 4 criteria that they would like to see incorporated into that. So we will absolutely be leaning on that, criteria as we work on an economic analysis. But he further goes to say economic impact considerations on existing Juneau businesses do not appear to be a criterion in the matrix. Seems the location focused criteria to date is on reducing city costs rather than also including and considering impact costs on downtown Juneau businesses, taxes they pay, and jobs they create. Moving the city hall out of downtown could be existential for some downtown businesses. And then he gives a few examples and gives a great link to a website. And because you all can read this chat, I will let you go visit that website. But thank you for that question. And actually, there's two studies in here about how much a downtown worker will spend downtown. This is $2,500 to $3,500 a year in the downtown economy. So really just highlighting the importance of civic centers to the vibrance of downtown. And thank you, Mr. Mitchell, for passing along those links. That'll be really helpful. I think, and I apologize for missing Mr. Jones at the end there. We all miss Mr. Jones, so thank you for commenting in. Should I ramble on some more, Chair Bryson, or do we have
well, let's see where Miss Samby is. Well, where is Miss Samby in the poll?
We have 61% of the attendees have answered the poll.
I'll add another question that Mr. Racewick stated was top choices should have one listed as none of the above. And I think the status quo option is the none of the above option to continue staying in our leased facilities in the current city hall.
I would agree with you on that, Ms. Kester. If we do nothing, that means we stay at City Hall, we keep paying the existing bills, but we would have a future bill of renovation. Anybody that's gone into City Hall for any length of time, you'll notice the little things like it's 85 degrees upstairs every day. They can't not let it be 85 degrees. And it's just from old systems like that. So I would agree with you that the no option would be that none of the above. It would get us the same result. Miss Samby, I think that that's given everybody about enough time.
Okay, I can end the poll if you'd like.
Let's go ahead and end that poll. And from what I understand, you're going to be able to share the results with us here momentarily.
I will be, just a moment.
Excellent.
Can you see those?
There you go. So I'll just go ahead and go down this poll results here, if I may, Miss Kester. So the first choice, 11 out of 28 people picked the 450 Whittier as their first choice. Second highest number of first choice was the Downtown Transit Center, followed by the Walmart site, and then Status Quo. For choice 2, Whittier again came in for choice 2 in first place. Downtown Transit Center was second place for the second. These are kind of hard to read like that. Walmart was the third place choice for second place. I hope what I'm saying is making sense to all of you. For third place, Status Quo was above and beyond everybody else. And for fourth place, the Walmart site had the largest number at 13. And so just the unofficial record from the poll, and Ms. Kester, from what I understand, you're going to compile these to be on the website for this project. So unofficially, Whittier, followed by the Downtown Transit Center, followed by Status Quo, followed by Walmart. So thank you very much for your participation in that poll, and thank you for Ms. Samby for putting that on. And Ms. Kester, did we want to go back, or we were going to open it up for live questions. Is that correct at this point?
And that would be great. Maybe Ms. Sandby could stop sharing her screen, and then you can see all of us. And I will, while we are teeing that up, I did get one more question in the chat that I will read, and that's from Ms. Mitchell. Anecdotally, I know that if people have to park more than 50 to 100 feet from their destination, they perceive this to be a long distance. Proximity of the city hall to downtown is similarly an important metric for a vibrant downtown. How are you taking this economic impact into consideration? You know, I think maybe I will punt that to you, Mr. Boyle, because you will be doing that economic impact analysis. And I know we've gotten, like I mentioned, good feedback from the Downtown Business Association, but do you want to spend a moment talking about that next step before we pull people over to provide verbal public comment if they desire?
Sure. So as we jump into the economic analysis of sites, what that does take into account is are elements of how location affects surrounding businesses, how a configuration relates to access is a little harder to kind of quantify in dollars and cents from an economic standpoint. So I'm not sure if it's going to be, that particular question is going to be very well addressed. However, it would probably factor into kind of usage calculations in terms of who would choose to come to a facility versus do their business over the computer like this. But the other aspects of the economic analysis include, for example, if we were to move City Hall out of its current configuration, the economic analysis does quantify the impact of, say, converting Marine View apartments or space into apartments again. It takes into consideration the value of the existing City Hall building if it were to be put up for sale to become a retail or hospitality type facility serving our tourist waterfront. So those trades are part of that consideration. That economic analysis also looks at an extended time period for all of the factors and variables in the calculations. And that time period is impacted. Well, the other variables, that are applied within that time period include anticipated performance within the community. So if we were to, for example, I don't want to make this sound too biased, but it is a consideration. If we were to pull all of the city employees out of downtown and put them at any site in another location, how does that affect all the downtown businesses? Well, that is part of the economic analysis as well, to the extent that it can be at the level that we're doing this. So I don't know if this is getting at answering your questions, but that model is a pretty complicated piece. And if you want to see an example of it, if it's still available on the website, the work that was done in 2018, 2019 for doing this project on the transportation center was available to the public through the city website at that time. So I don't know if Katie or Jean, if you know if that's still available to the public.
Yes,
Information
that
it is
still
available?
is on the new City Hall website, the study from 2018-19.
Yeah, so one of the tasks that we have is to update that, of course, because it's still relevant to that option. But that type of measurement is to be applied to the sites that are chosen by the Public Works Facility Committee to advance to the next level.
Well, thank you, Mr. Boyle. So from what we understand, we'll get really a deep dive into how these different projects would economically impact the city as a whole and their specific area. And thank you for that, because you reminded me of my other comment I was going to make about the Walmart building. The Walmart option, or the Walmart building option, is the only option that removes millions of dollars of property from the property tax rolls, as we're talking about economic factors, and that is a very real economic factor. I know that we don't have enough information compiled to accurately say this is how much it's going to benefit or cost an area, but that would be the next town hall meeting, maybe?
Yeah, I think that's the plan, is that we would get to the point where we're directed to, by the city, to pursue the focus on a selected smaller group of sites. And then from that process will become what is the source of the next public meeting on this.
Excellent. Well, speaking of the public part of public meeting, Director Kester, are we ready to move? Raise your hand if you would like to make a public statement about this, or ask us a question directly. And Miss Samby, I'll just let you pull people over as
Okay.
they
I've
raise
gotta
or
get-
lower their hands.
Gotta get back to this meeting here. Hang on. I'm trying to get out of the view that I have so I can see the participants. Hang on. Okay. So our first participant is Alex Vrebeck.
I'll
And
pull Alex over.
he should be able to speak now and unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. If you could state
Awesome.
your name and part of town you're in for the record, and you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Alex Vrebeck. I live North Douglas, and I'm here to specifically advocate for a downtown option for the CBJ new City Hall / consolidated buildings. I think, as many of you heard already tonight, some of the possible economic impacts of removing city from down hall. And I just want to mostly make people aware of that possibility. I work for the Downtown Business Association, and with some assistance from my board members, we did do some research, and that number quoted earlier, that $2,500 to $3,500 annually. If you actually, that's from a number of years ago, and from Wisconsin. We're in Alaska, where cost of living can be quite a bit higher, as well as some inflation to go into that. That number would probably look more like $7,000 annually. So when you pull that money out of downtown from our membership for the DBA is around 120 businesses. That's a pretty large impact. And having owned a business myself in the downtown core, seeing those people coming into my shop and working with them, and not just CBJ employees, but also citizens utilizing services in the downtown core, I feel like that number grows even larger. So I definitely appreciate you guys bringing up that point and looking at that. So thank you all so much for all your hard work and your due diligence and getting all of this done and pulling these numbers together and these options together. I appreciate all of you for that. And thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Mr. Vrebeck, for coming in and speaking this evening. Did
Thank you.
anyone have any questions for Ms. Vrebeck? Seeing none, thank you for coming and testifying this evening. Wrong button. Miss Sammy, do we have anyone else with a raised hand?
We do not have anyone else with a raised hand at the moment.
That's all the questions you guys have for us? No other? All right, we'll give everybody another moment. Mr. Bibb, Mr. Simpson, Mr. Boyle, are there any comments that you'd like to add to maybe how this process has gone along, what some things that you guys are personally looking at to help get us the best information so we can make a good decision. Any of you gentlemen, Mr. Bibb?
Yeah, I'll take a try of this. Well, I encourage involvement. This is this is speaking to the choir in this one, but if you can encourage more people, if they feel interested to come and be involved in this process, out of most any building that is in consideration, a city hall is of great importance to a community, both symbolically. And in this case, it's from my 58 years of being around this community, and I think I share that longevity with Steve and Sean, who's been here a number of, not 58, but he's getting to be quite the local. How we're trying to approach this is to look at the holistic manner of these decisions, which I hope we bring that to the table in discussion, because I think what we're doing is trying to consider beyond just financial, but also in the broader vision of what Juneau is and where it needs to go. And I can think of no better a process or successive processes to have this to be a robust participation from the public to be part of this so they feel ownership. So it's a little too much of a positive on it, but I encourage the next steps going into as we look at refining sites and decisions, that people step up and have a great conversation. If anything, we need good conversations, both in both critique and in optimism. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Mr. Bibb. We've had some great comments from the public. Mr. Simpson.
Yeah, I would just like to say, as I've been in designing civic architecture for the past 30 years. And I think Sean had mentioned that James and I worked on the Valley Library together, and then I had a lead design role in the SLAM building. But what I really appreciate about civic buildings is the buildings themselves, but their reach beyond the building, what the impacts on downtown or the sites that they occupy have. And so just really looking for those potentials. And so I think some of these downtown sites are pretty exciting when you think about creating a building that can really start to shape a downtown in a more distinct way and have a real strong, as James said, a symbolic quality as well.
Excellent, Mr. Simpson. I think that really sums up what we're trying to accomplish here. I saw that two people have raised
Yes.
their hands for questions.
Yeah, so
Ms. Sandy, if you could bring over Duff Mitchell,
I
followed
will.
by Angie Nolan.
Okay.
Yeah, good.
And Director Kester, while we're doing that, it does look like additional questions do keep popping up. Are you tracking those, ma'am? Thank you, Director Kester. Mr. Mitchell, thank you for joining us this evening. Could you state your name and part of town that you live in for the record? And you have 2 minutes, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Assemblymember Bryson. I'm Duff Mitchell. I live in West Juneau, and I'm speaking tonight, as a member of the Downtown Business Association Board of Directors. And I'd like to just point out that, our community, not unlike other communities, has already invested in revitalization in the downtown areas, trying to beautify the downtown, trying to make it the aura and the quality of life greater. And I've read, some of the studies that Alec has talked about and some of the lessons learned. Believe it or not, there's some communities that have moved their city halls out of downtown, and then they've found such a death spiral and other problems that they created, maybe unintentionally, that they've actually paid lots more money to move them back into downtown. So I just want to put for the record that there is those cases out there. Some of the communities, aren't as blessed as us, so they're in different parts of the areas of the country. But I think those lessons are important. The other thing is that, we have this perennial and, all my life, this talk about the capital move. And I just really feel that it's really important that we be very careful as a community that we don't give fodder for those things. I know that I've read blogs where, Juneau's talking about moving their city hall. Well, that's great. Let's move the capital. And I know that's very shrill and very short-sighted, but nonetheless, I think that I just don't want to play as a community into some of that thing. And then lastly, I kind of had a question. I know that, Telephone Hill in the years past, it was bought up by the state of Alaska. Is there any way that, as a part of that Juneau property that we're owed from the state, getting that key real estate maybe turned over to the CBJ so we have other options or we have other abilities to, own our downtown area? Anyways, I just throw that out there.
Mr. Mitchell, that's our time. I tell you what, does anybody have a direct answer for Mr. Mitchell? Do we know the current status of Telephone Hill? I thought that was coming to Juneau. Director Kester, are you up to speed on that?
Yeah, I will say that administration is in negotiations with the state over that. So very much still a priority and very much still active, but not near the finish line.
And did Mr. Bibb?
Yeah, I'll try to do this really simple in terms, I don't want to go too far. But if you read back in the history of Juneau's development, and this is really important to understand how the city engaged being the state capital. And you can believe back in the 60s when as soon as it became a state, there was pressure even then to whether Juneau was the appropriate location long-term. And we've been fighting that in my history and all my life. A lot of the plans of development downtown where the original state museum was situated, where the current SLAM was. I mean, those are decisions made by the public at that time to make this Juneau feel like a state capital and make it, and it was a project that was supported and paid for by the city and borough of Juneau for the most part and given to the state. And that's the frame of mind, I think, and I know this gets into on the idea of trying to be unbiased as you can about site selection, but it goes beyond financial. The history of this downtown is an ongoing struggle with how a city develops and is built. And I do think that it becomes broader than this community and broader than a discussion we may think is important locally, is that if people come down here for session every year, does the city itself have the nature of a state capital? Does it feel like it has vitality? And that's a continual effort that the communities, citizens of the community needs to approach as they did back in the 60s, that they recognize that it's our stewardship to make decisions on growth and development that support the bigger picture of what we are through the region and the state.
Mr. Bibb, thank you so much for that point. I think you just really exemplified why we need a proper city hall, because we're not doing it just for Juneau, we're doing it for the entire state. So thank you for getting that point made out there. Does anyone have any further questions for Mr. Mitchell, who I think is still on the line? Mr. Mitchell, thank you for coming and testifying and participating in our town hall meeting this evening.
Thank you.
Angie Nolan is ready for you to go ahead.
Excellent. Ms. Nolan, do we have you?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Bryson.
If you could say your name and part of town that you live in for the record, and then you have 2 minutes.
Yes, Angie Nolan. I am a real estate broker with Alaska Unlimited Realty, and I represent the Walmart building, and I do live in the Valley. A couple things that I would like to clarify is we do have a lease. The land lease on the property does not begin until June 2025. So we do have a little bit more time on that lease before you would start paying that $271,000 amount. That land is potentially able to be purchased, and I can discuss that with you later at a later time. One of the things that I want people also to consider is the other uses of that building. So if it was something that was part of the city, was in a portion of the building, then let's look at what other things could be taken into consideration. We have the Lemon Creek Fire Station that was part of the Lemon Creek plan. I have spoken to many different people about that, where a portion of the building could be used for that. One of the big needs that we're seeing in Juneau is for childcare. So we could also portion a space into childcare. We're also needing more space for the hospital where the city could also take a portion of Walmart and put some of the hospital things in there. I've had many different people that have approached me that have wanted to lease or purchase a portion of that building. So that is something that's out there that would be available to everybody as well. Also one of the biggest priorities that we have in Juneau is housing. And when that land is purchased, you can also use that remaining outside land from the parking area that you're not using. That could be used for housing. That could also be sold once the land was purchased to other people. I've had many people approach me to put new businesses on that parking lot as well. So I think that this is the beginning of the discussion, but I think it's definitely not the end. I think that more things could be explored, and I would love to talk to people about that as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nolan. Questions from the group for Ms. Nolan? Ms. Nolan, I think the most pressing question, and I don't recall if you stated this or not, is purchasing the land. A city hall that is not on the land, that doesn't own the land it's on, just almost becomes a non-starter. What are the positions, or what's the possibility of being able to buy the land? I mean, that's what this transaction would require for Walmart to stay in the running with the rest of these. And I know I'm speaking way too frankly, but that's the elephant in the room. Could we get the land, and how much would it cost?
I do not know what the cost of that would be, but it is in part of the arrangement when the property was previously purchased, that the land could be purchased with 2 appraisals and agreed on with the seller of the land. So that is a possibility that could be explored further.
And Ms. Nolan, do we have an estimated value of just the land?
No, Mr. Bryson, I don't have an estimated value. That unfortunately is, again, the elephant in the room. If you're looking at some of what the other lands are selling for, it's 10 acres. It's a very large parcel. So it's definitely, it is going to have a lot of value in that land. If I could address one of the questions that was being said
Go ahead,
by Mr. Nossel. One of the questions that he has is, if CBJ leases the Walmart building, how does that remove it from property tax rules? Doesn't the owner still pay property tax on it? And yes, the owner is still paying property tax on it. That is something that's still being paid, that's still there. One of the other things that was said is to maintain that building, maintain that land for another larger store to come back in. And that option has been explored. We continue to explore that option. One of the problems that we're seeing is they're wanting a minimum population of 50,000 people, which we don't have. So just to kind of explain, some of the drawbacks and some of the problems that we're having, and that's why.
Well, we greatly appreciate it. Did anybody think of any questions to ask Ms. Nolan?
I just had a quick comment. Angela, I wanted to thank you for taking us on a tour of the building. I was quite surprised to find it to be a mostly dry and also a steel frame building, which goes a long way towards some of the concerns about construction reconstruction. The challenges that we talked about still remain, of course, and they have a cost that we've been trying to find a way to hang some values on it for the city. I think that the biggest obstacles, aside from cost, come down to where the city wants to put that kind of investment in the community. And that's, of course, why we're having these public meetings and discussions, to try to get all of the feedback possible from the community to help our leaders make those decisions.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Borley, so much for everyone that we have shown the property to. There is a YouTube video on our web channel, Alaska Unlimited Realty, that you can see the inside and the outside of the building, and I would be happy to take the assembly members through the building as well. But thank you so much for your time.
Ms. Nolan, thank you so much for coming this evening and presenting your information. We greatly appreciate it. And I am a sucker for a good field trip, so yeah, all right. Any further questions for Ms. Nolan? Ms. Nolan, thank you again for coming this evening. All right, Director Kester, as we get close to that 7:30 time period, could we maybe do the share screen and put the website on for people to go get additional information, or did we have the screen that had the website on it?
Yeah, Miss Sandbay, if you could pull that up, and while she's doing that, we've got a couple more comments in the chat.
Go ahead, Ms. Kester.
One was from Mr. Worrell. Is there consideration or important factors related to availability of federal funds or opportunity for infrastructure motivating decisions or timing? And I would say that this project has been ranked by the Assembly on our legislative priority list. However, it's not a great fit for the current infrastructure bill as, you know, a municipal project. And it's unlikely that it'd be a great fit for the state to put money into. So, you know, I think that it's absolutely a priority of the Assembly and they're putting it out there, but there's no specific pot of money that we are chasing that's affecting our timing on the decision. A couple of other comments here, just while we're closing up. A comment from Mr. Jones about JEDC study of winter business travel and talking about how government and business is such a driver for the economy, and we don't want tourism to take over in summer and downtown to be vacant in winter. And another comment about parking should be a top priority because it's very difficult to find a space, and therefore Mr. Racewood does not favor the downtown site. So I think I've captured all those comments. I'm so glad you guys participated because that really helped add to the meeting. So that closes the chat box. Again, we will consolidate all these and answer all of these and present it to the Public Works and Facilities Committee and put it on the website that's listed right there.
Excellent. So everyone that joined us and hung out to watch our town hall tonight about City Hall, the results will be at juno.org, Engineering and Public Works. They'll be able to just click on those links, correct, Ms. Kester? And that'll get you over there. So I'd like to greatly thank every single person sitting in front of your computer that took the time out of your Wednesday evening to sit here and listen about City Hall. I sincerely appreciate your effort and your interest in making sure that we get this right. And to the team at Northwind Architects, we greatly appreciate your efforts on this. And to city staff, Ms. Kester, Ms. Wren, thank you for putting this together and for allowing us to have a town hall on City Hall. And unless there's something further, any last comments from the group? I'm going to say that this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for coming this evening.